Imagine being a soldier during the American Revolutionary War and receiving thy daily ration of just 1 pound of tough, bony meat. Life for these soldiers was incredibly difficult. They struggled with primitive living conditions, often lacking adequate blankets, clothing, and cooking equipment. There were even times when firewood was scarce, making it nearly impossible to cook their meager provisions. With insufficient supplies and poor weather conditions, cooking on the march or even in camp was a constant challenge. The soldiers were promised rations of 1 pound of meat and 1 pound of bread each day, but more often than not, this promise was not fully met. They rarely received the full amount, and when they did, the meat was often tough and difficult to cook, such as salt beef or pork, or a fresh cut that was usually hard to prepare. Soldiers were issued very basic equipment for cooking, and the lack of proper tools often meant they had to cook their provisions over an open fire using simple methods. Joseph Plum Martin, a soldier who wrote a memoir about his experiences, describes the daily struggle. Soldiers were promised basic provisions like 1 pound of meat, salt, bread, and even a small amount of alcohol, but they often went days without eating or had to rely on whatever they could find in the fields or forests. The cooking methods they used were primitive at best. Many soldiers cooked their meat on a stick over the fire, often eating their food raw because they were too tired or lacked the means to cook it properly. One of the most common methods of cooking meat was over an open fire, where soldiers would use a simple wire fork, a tool commonly found in Revolutionary War archaeological sites. Cooking meat this way was often the quickest option, but it was not the most nutritious or efficient. The meat was typically tough and chewy, especially given the poor quality of cuts they had. Officers at the time recommended that soldiers make a broth or soup from their meat, as it would retain more nutrients and allow them to cook other items, such as bread or vegetables, in the same pot. This method was more practical but not always achievable due to the lack of proper equipment. Despite the hardships, soldiers made do with what they had. They would often boil the meat with water to make a simple stew, adding hard dumplings made from their bread ration. This method was an effective way to stretch their rations and create a meal